Wendy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Caroline. I am excited and honored to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to get to speak with you today. I am happy to talk with you about your experience and your mission to help people find their purpose and achieve their goals, including artists. Start us off by talking about how you achieved some of your biggest goals yet after the age of 60, including losing over, is it 100 pounds total?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, I started out, I'm now a confident Christian entrepreneur and a big goal achiever, but I haven't always been that person. Years ago, I was copying all my friends, comparing myself unfavorably, feeling not enough and insufficient, inferior, and I was very obese. And I was miserable, as you can imagine. And I have learned that when God wants to do something big in your life and to achieve these big goals, He often prepares you. And I have experienced over 50 years of seeing this happen about every 7 years, where He takes me through big things, events, big losses. And when I lost the second 50 pounds, He had taken me through a lot of losses. At the age of 60, I lost my mom. I lost my brother 7 months later. I had to have foot surgery in between those two things unexpectedly. And there were a couple of other big things. But I look at it as tilling the soil of my life. And I'm not a gardener, but I'm surrounded by gardeners. And it's a creative process, isn't it? So He tills the soil and He removes everything and stirs it all up and dumps fertilizer on it. Then, and only then, does He plant seeds. And I heard a story, an analogy about a seed. What does a seed have to do? There was a seed, he wanted to be a mighty oak. But what does that seed have to do in order to be able to become that mighty oak that he's purposed to be? He has to be buried. He has to die. And most importantly, you have to be willing to change. And what God has done in order to cause me to lose over 100 pounds was first all of this tilling and producing an environment where I was desperate for change and was ready to not only say please, but change me. And then He began that work of weight loss and other big goals. The first time was when I had the biggest trial of my life. When I was comparing and copying and competing and coveting others' lives, thinking I could take, they're doing this well and they're doing this well. And if I just do this and I copy that and I put it together, I'm going to be an amazing person, right? If you are able to achieve other people's or another person's goals completely, if you were able to do that, you will have failed in life because you will have missed your purpose. And one day in May, God changed my life, and I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. They told me I had two football-sized tumors inside of me. It had spread and it was not caught early. And everyone I knew and lots of people that I didn't were praying for me. And God was doing so many things during this time. One of the first was to get me into surgery within 3 days of my diagnosis. When the surgeon went in, she found one only one tumor, still football sized, but it had not spread, it was contained, and it was caught early. Let that sink in, because I knew at that time I was a walking miracle. Either a trained professional had seen and measured a tumor that didn't exist, or God had done a miracle. The next year, I went through chemo, and I have now been over 20 years cancer-free. The following year after that diagnosis, in desperation to be healthier, I lost my first 50 pounds. And I felt as though if that domino falling was the first one in many others, a big goal achievement. But I felt like if God can do that in my life, if that's possible, anything's possible. And over years, then I began setting and achieving big goals. But I learned we are transformed more through our trials than our triumphs. And I learned my purpose, which is, well, first of all, I realized my story's changed forever. I'm not like anybody else on earth. No more, need to copy and compare. I didn't stop at that point, but I thought I'm uniquely made. I'm completely unique. And I am a uniquely created person for a purpose. And God showed me my purpose to help you, empower you to embrace that you also are uniquely created by God for a purpose, and to find and fulfill that purpose. So it was a very life-changing event, of course, but I always feel like that's when my life began. So that is how I began setting and achieving big goals. But all the goals were not achieved overnight, of course.
Right. Our listeners are going to say, how did you lose 50 pounds and then another 50 pounds? I know you can't tell us everything, but they're definitely going to want a little bit of detail on that.
And I can share part of that. And then I also will say that I have 2 big offers of goal achievement based on what I've been able to do. Now I help others with. And so I have the superhero weight loss system that goes into all the how. And so you can too. And, I want to say too, people will either say, oh, that's great for you, and you were able to do that. Wonderful, but I can't. But I want to be the person who's very transparent that I am a normal, average, nothing special person. And if I can do it, so can you. And I have been able to get it down to very succinct, 3 steps for my email list building, and, the core of how I lost weight the second time. And I'm still practicing this and still losing weight. I'm now 15 pounds from my wedding weight.
Wow.
And I intend to get there.
I hear you. I'm on the same goal. 15 pounds to go.
So I basically, when I was desperate and said, oh, God, change me, then through a series of very small but random events, I found the app Lose It, which I still use daily. And in there, I set up goals, macros, not watching calories, not counting calories. But it instructed me how to break it down. And when I was able to keep my percentage of carbohydrates, to 10%, roughly 10%, And that's the core principle. Then my appetite is under control.
Right.
I prayed for years, God, take away my appetite. My appetite's out of control. And well, a lot of it has to do, and hormones, there's so many things I could go off on this. I
Yep.
related to sugar.
Yep. As cancer is, sugar and carbs.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. For me, part of the big part of the equation in losing weight and maintaining is to make sure I follow clean eating, which will
Yes.
eliminate a lot of the MSG and the extra products because
Yes.
the side effects can be surprising. People won't realize that it's adversely
Yes.
affecting you, even though it's might be quote unquote healthy food. If it's in a box and has got more than 5 ingredients, you can run into a whole different host of issues.
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing is this is also part of my story. I talk a lot about your story. And God is a creator. He's creative, the ultimate creator, and you're creative. And so I want you, your listener, if you're listening to me right now, watching, oftentimes we self-destruct or we cause our own obstacles because we say, well, I can't. I could never. And I want you to bring up your creativity, that creative voice, and say, I can. This is possible, and I will find the way.
Well, I think this is something that people can look into because there are times where, you encounter obstacles in your life that are mysterious physiologically or emotionally, and you don't realize that there are connections.
Yes.
And I do need to steer us back to, I want to hit upon your growing email list. I know our listeners as artists have to promote themselves if they are looking to sell their art. It's really important that they maintain an email list. At some point, I think they're going to come upon this issue.
Yeah.
And they don't know where to
Absolutely.
start, or they feel like they tried and it didn't work, or they just feel like it's overwhelming. So I would love for you to talk about growing a list, since it's so very important to artists who want to get out there and get their art known and to sell it.
Yes. Yes. And let me also say with the comparison thing that I think probably affects artists a lot, is the that there are, no matter how big and successful you become, there are always, and this is in every area of life, there are always going to be people ahead of you and people behind you. You are always, all your life, going to be tempted to compare or think, but look at her, him. Especially in art and in creativity, it's your very essence that comes out in your art. And you must embrace who you are. And you love certain things and you don't like other things, and you need to be fine with, And so it's part of, and it's the foundational level of my 3-step system to an automated email list growth. And not just to grow an email list, but you're going to need to automate it if you want to make a life and not just a living. As we all know, there's only this much time to do it, all the things we want. And if you're an artist, you probably have so many ideas. And, I personally feel like there isn't enough time in my life to do all the dreams that I still have. And I encourage you to dream, keep dreaming, keep setting goals. And whenever people say, well, you did this after 60, and I think age wasn't a factor for me. And I don't want it to be a factor for you. And I hope I'm an inspiration that life isn't over at 40. Life isn't over at 50. And it sure isn't over at 60. And if you still have breath, then there are goals left for you to achieve. So I also want you to know that I'm going into all the things that have held you back before I tell you the solution. So I have overcome procrastinating perfectionism as well. And I know so many people struggle with this. And overcoming that starts up here in what you tell yourself. And I've already alluded to that a couple times. But you tell yourself the truth in love. There's a Bible verse that says, to tell the truth in love. Well, tell yourself the truth in love. And so you have to replace all those overthinking and critical thoughts, and you're going to have naysayers. There's not a person on earth, especially people who have achieved great things. Read their biographies. Every great person had naysayers and criticism. And you have to just say, not listening. And tell yourself the truth, which is, God created me uniquely. God created you uniquely, one of a kind. You're a masterpiece. And He's writing a story in and through your life, often through the trials as well as the triumphs. Embrace it. And I say, tell your story for God's glory. That's my mantra. But you need to tell yourself the truth, that you are a masterpiece. There's no mistakes, and that your quirks are often what make you so special.
Thank you.
I love that. I love that. I'm really glad that that's true. And then the 3 steps that I take people through. Number 1, it is identify who you are. Only as you identify who you are and what your gifts are, what's your secret sauce, can you then identify your ideal client. And because you might get to the point, if you don't do this first step, you might get to the point you're making money. You're making money and you're successful, but you're really unhappy. You're frustrated. You don't like who you're working with, and you don't like what you're serving them with, but you're stuck. Well, you're not stuck forever. You can, pivot. But if you do this at a more beginning level, it's better. So figuring out, identifying who you are, and then figuring out who your ideal client is and their biggest problem. And I walk you through this, and then creating what I call your irresistibly clickable freebie. Because their biggest problem, you know what your secret sauce solution is to it at the most basic level. That becomes your freebie, your lead magnet. And then the 3rd step is the FAST avatar attraction method. The avatar is your ideal client, and avatar attraction method, which employs Facebook ads, which is still the fast way to get there. And in my offer, my system, we do those done for you. So you don't have to do those. But I walk you through, and these are the steps to where you have raving fans coming onto your list. This is the system I use to build my list to over 12,000, just over 2 years. But not only that, with a 37% open rate, when the average or industry average is 18 or 20%. And so there's 3 things you need to be or do. First, you need to be transparent. Be you. Be you. When you're writing emails and when you're, reaching out to potential clients, be yourself. And then 2, be true. It's like a relationship, almost like dating, where it's casual. You're just getting to know one another. And then you're going a little deeper and you're being faithful and true. And then the third is commitment, where you're asking your clients to commit, but they know, like, and trust you. So that's not in a nutshell. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
There's so much to it, but it's basically 3 steps. But that's how you build an email list of raving fans that come onto your list daily while you sleep, automated.
That's wonderful. So I have a couple questions, and one of them is, so you've talked about helping people lose weight, and we're talking about email list building and finding your purpose. How would you describe, in a nutshell, your business then as a life coach? Because these are different types of directives that you're working, helping people reach, but it sounds like you have different tracks. You can help them specifically with a type of mission. Yes. How do you partition or segment your business?
I call myself an empowerment coach.
Okay.
And you in life have different goals. You have at different times, you have different goals. So I have achieved big goals. The 2 that I focus on the most are the weight loss and the email list, because that's what people want to know the most. But there are foundational things to achieving whatever your goal is. And so I'm the empowerment coach that helps you. What's the next level you want to go to?
That's great. Now, this, I am guessing from what I have learned about you, applies also to your ability to help people get organized in their lives so that they can move forward. So can you talk about that for a minute and how important that is? I think as artists, we know how important that is.
Well, that was one of the big goals. I didn't, say all the big goals, but one of the big goals that God began to accomplish in my life was taking me from very disorganized to organized. And then raising our children and homeschooling them start to finish, raising them to adulthood to be, there's a point in life where probably all of us say, is this child going to be able to function in society? I'm not sure. And to be able to raise children to adulthood who we like being with. They're walking with the Lord, they're succeeding in life, and they're people that we like being with, who like being with us. One of the goals, dream trips that I was able to organize and saved miles for was a dream trip to Italy with all of our family. We have 2 children, and then our daughter's husband at that time. He's still her husband, but all 5 of us went to Italy. And then after 60, I started my online business. I lost another 50 pounds for a total of over 100 pounds. And I started working out with a personal trainer for the first time. And I grew my email list to over 12,000. And I've become a speaker and a writer. And, so I'm still adding to that list. But the organization is critical. It's crucial. And again, on my blog, there are many, and because it's such a topic that, again, we could spend a whole series of podcasts on, I'm going to point them to that. But I have as my freebie that was my emphasis, and now I'm speaking more to the entrepreneur and business owner. But I was speaking to that often stay-at-home mom, homeschooler. And so my first lead magnet freebie was checklists for consistent daily routines. So number 1, you want to have just a few why I failed in the past, and you might be too, is by making the list too big. I would decide this week I'm going to, lose 5 pounds. I'm going to make fabulous dinners every night and using new recipes. I'm going to have my house completely picked up and in order, and so forth and so on. Well, I was setting myself up for failure. You don't have to do that. So this list has it has a morning list and an evening list, and start with just a daily. Systems and routines will save your sanity. Systems and routines. And consistency is what you want, right? We all want consistency. That means not perfection, consistency. So set small goals and then become consistent with them. And then add onto that list. So there's only on each of the morning and the evening routine checklist, there's only 3-4 things. In the morning, because I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, reading the Bible is a have to. And evening is prayer. And then there's just a couple of other things. Immediate success by getting it and doing that today and checking it off and okay. And then being consistent. Well, you might not do 7 days. You might not even do 5. Maybe you'll do 3. Maybe you'll do 1. But if you do 1 day a week for a month, and then you increase it to 2 days a week for a month, you're going to become more and more consistent with that routine. And then I have talked about how to keep your house in order. One of the first things is to know where you're going to put it. If you know where it belongs, putting it away is not all that hard. But we make it hard because we're agonizing about, well, I don't know where to put that. I'm not quite sure. And then we decide and we can't remember where we put it. I've been there. Can you tell? I've been there, done that. So then I recommend, if you've been putting off, procrastinating certain jobs that you think they're just big, they're just huge, time yourself. I used to not clean up my kitchen and load my dishwasher because I thought it was so huge and it was going to take me so long. And one day I timed it and it took me 10 minutes. So just start. Tell yourself you don't have to get it all done. You're just going to do it for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Just do it for 10 minutes. You don't have to finish. That's another life-changing tip. Just do it for 10 minutes. Oftentimes, I don't know if you've experienced this, Caroline, but for me, oftentimes, once I start, I finish. I want to do it longer. Don't overdo it, but just start.
And I find for me, one of the examples I use is to build in some exercise during my day, because sometimes I'm sitting for long periods at the computer doing design. I build in habit pairing. So one of them is the time of day if I'm at work, and at a certain time of day, every day at work, I attempt to take a break, which I've now begun to do at lunchtime. It used to be in the morning when I first arrived. But sometimes when you first arrive, you feel like you should be checking email and not seem like you just arrived and now you're not in your office. So I will take my lunch break where I work at the casino right now in media design. I will go climb the hotel stairs, and it's 12 stories. I'll go up the stairs and then come back down, and then I go up again and come back down. And it doesn't actually take that long. I could probably do one more climb, but it's a thing of, like you said, don't go too far, because then I have to, maybe for me in particular, one of my hips will get sore if I do too many rotations, basically. So it's a timing thing where at noon, my brain goes, it's time to do the stairs. And I start to look forward to that. It's kind of building muscle memory for that activity. And the other one is I put my exercise equipment in the living room behind the couch where I can see the TV. And I built a timing habit. Before I sit down on that couch in the evening, I do 15 minutes on one machine. One's a
Mhm.
stepper. And then I get off it, even if I feel like I could keep going. And I do 15 minutes on the elliptical, which is beside it. Now, it might seem weird to have two pieces of equipment in the middle of your living room, but it works. If I go to watch my favorite streaming show and I have some time with my husband, it's only half an hour of delay. And he's right there on the couch. 15
Okay.
minutes on one machine, hop off, go to the next machine, 15 minutes. And it might seem inconsequential, but if you do that 3, 4 times a week and you
Oh,
build it into,
absolutely.
this
Yeah.
is what I do before I get on the couch, you're going to do it. And I think you
The
can
other,
apply that to
yes,
your
to so
craft.
many, yes.
You can apply that to studio time.
For artists who are like, how can I find time for my art? 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Just, can you do anything in 10 minutes? And then time blocking is so, so big for me. But I want to digress 1 second to say that my superhero weight loss system is losing weight without exercise, because I did not exercise and I lost 100 pounds. However, I know that it's difficult to keep the weight off without exercise, but I want you to know that you don't have to adopt someone else's exercise habit. You do you.
Right.
And for me, I have arthritis in my feet. That is why I had to have surgery 10 years ago, and why people are constantly saying, walk, walk, walk. No, walking is not a good idea for me.
Right. It's the individual.
And I have arthritis in my hips too, and that kind of thing. But I'm
Yep.
on no medications, praise God, and I'm still
Yes.
losing weight. And so I want people to know that there's no one way. You said, people are going to want to know how I lost weight, but there isn't one way only to lose weight.
So you help people find the right route for them.
Yes, yes,
And that's the
absolutely.
critical answer. That's important.
Yes, it's at the center of everything that I do, is because you are you do you, and be you. And so, yes, you can lose weight, and you don't have to exercise, and you don't have to be that person that you see that, they say, don't worry about it. But then the other thing is time blocking, and that has to do with the organization. Having a schedule. I'm very spontaneous at my core, but I've learned so much organization. But I didn't change me at the core. And I know if you're an artist, oftentimes you're kind of a free thinker, and we're creative. And we've got so many ideas, and all of a sudden today, I want to do this. I've got this great idea. I want to do this. Or this is calling my name, or there's this opportunity to do this. But on the schedule, it says I'm doing this. Well, there are times when you can with time blocking. I like to block out at least an hour, 2 hours, sometimes a day, where I'm focusing on this today. I'm a writer. So on days that I'm writing a book right now. And that's my next big goal. And transitions are very hard for me. I'm like that dog that circles, 10 times before it sits down, lays down. So I find it difficult to work for, I just get into it and then I have to change and go this direction. So time blocking with 1 or 2 hours, and with writing often about 5 or 6 hours at a time. Block it out. And this is what I'm going to do. This is this day. And you can move if you had something else time blocked for that day, and you've got another time block on a different day, you can swap them. And that has saved me. That has saved my sanity. And also not judging myself for not being hard and fast about us stopping and starting at exactly the time. That's not me. So I encourage you. Yes, we'll find out if you work with me. We'll find out who you are, how you're wired, and so that you can achieve more and you will have time for your art.
So thank you. I want to start by saying thank you, Wendy, so much for your time today in sharing all of your wisdom. I think that artists in particular, a lot of these suggestions are practical suggestions and they're certainly implementable. But artists in particular, I think, need to, in order to overcome overwhelm, remember the power of surrender and that they're not alone on this journey, but they need the encouragement and the empathy that you offer through your coaching. And so I think many of our artist listeners, they don't suffer from a lack of ideas, but too many. I think they often feel stuck because they feel overwhelmed, combined with a feeling of unworthiness in setting aside time to pursue their art. So I would love for you to wrap us up with your best advice for helping them to move toward their goals.
Well, this is another fantastic question. And first of all, I want to hug you and say there's nothing wrong with you and all those wonderful ideas. But you do have to be willing to surrender. I love that word because it's so important. And for me, it was when I surrendered at each stage that God was able to do huge things and directed me to the answers. And God doesn't steer a parked car. That's a saying. So begin. And there's a Bible verse that says, better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof. Ecclesiastes 7:8, I believe that is. And I used to be a starter and not a finisher. I would start a zillion things and I didn't finish. And I had so many ideas, and that's part of the problem. Well, when you recognize that you're not going to miss the opportunity if you don't do that now, and you focus, what's that one thing you're going to do? You start to implement systems and routines that can take it off of your mind. So you do those things. You do your morning list, you do your evening list without thinking about it. You do certain things that you have to do. It frees your brain. It frees your creative self to think and dream and come up with ideas. Write down your ideas, obviously. Maybe that's not obvious, but write down your ideas. Have a brain dump and a place where you write down these amazing ideas. And because you got the idea doesn't mean that you're supposed to do it now. What I love about writing down ideas and journaling is that often, years later, I will look and I will see, I had that idea way back then. And now I'm fulfilling it. So some practical tips. I said already, use 10 minutes. You got 10 minutes? Use it. Do little things, in keeping your house in order. Organize a drawer while you're talking on the phone. While you're listening to a podcast, wash the dishes. While you're, doing this, do that. We talked about exercising. I know a Emmy Award-winning videographer who every time that we were on our coaching call, she was on her treadmill. Whatever is your thing, ask God, what do you want me to do today? And I have had to, because I have so many ideas. One of the things I had to do in this last 6 months or a year was, do you want me, Lord, to focus on the email list building or the weight loss? I felt that God was saying to me, focus on the email list building for now. And for you, it might be focus on this for now. And in life, there are going to be interruptions, okay? Expect them. You're going to have interruptions. You're going to have naysayers. You're going to have difficulty. It doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. Expect it. Plan for it. I have a blog post about planning for interruptions, scheduling for them. When you do time blocking in your weekly schedule, I encourage you to do that. Leave space on either side of it. A very wonderful man named I think it's Donald Swenson. Dr. Swenson wrote the book Margin. On a white page, there's white space. If there wasn't white space, you wouldn't be able to read what was there. You need in your life white space margin around all the things you're doing. When you don't honor that, often you get sick. I get sick anyway. Or something happens to force you to take time. And you've experienced that, haven't you? So plan for the interruptions and have space around them, and don't overplan your day. Don't plan every last minute, every last second. Leave spaces that have nothing planned at all. And then plan in time for your art because it's important. This is a quote that I feel God gave me this morning. The urgent will always be calling and demanding loudly. The important whispers. Make time for what's important. And that will be different for you and you and you and you and you and me. And what is important for you and your life? Unapologetically, make time in your schedule for it. And God gives time enough. And He loves to do the impossible. We both have, Caroline and I, you and I have story after story of how God's laughed at us when we said, well, I know I'm doing this and this is what's going to happen. And He also has done the miraculous in our lives. Tell your story for His glory. He loves to do the miraculous and the impossible in your life. And dream big dreams and set big goals, that the only way it's going to happen is if He does it.